Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. I hope everybody's day is going beautiful. Hope the sun is shining. We've got an incredible guest for you today, Ryan McCormick. He's a publisher. He's a lot of things. I'm going to let him introduce himself, but he's not the only reason we're here today. We're here to talk about the life and the wisdom of Stuart Wilde. But before we get into him, Ryan, maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit.
Sure. My name's Ryan McCormick, and I have a pleasure of knowing Stuart Wilde, working with him, being his publicist, but I'm generally seeking a passionate seeker. I'm always seeking the truth, no matter where it lies. So I have this insatiable curiosity. And that's how I met the legendary metaphysical visionary Stuart Wilde. So he's one of those people that was seeking out, I guess, a person. He seemed to be the most rebellious person I've ever met in metaphysics. He would openly, I think, make fun of people in New Age movement because he thought they were very New Agey and they were like gurus, and he really wasn't a fan of gurus at all. So I found that he was refreshingly original, and he had an incredible sense of humor. And when I met him in person, we just clicked, and it was amazing just to learn from him. But he's one of those people that was a big trailblazer. He had Wayne Dyer as one of his students, and he was really respected and beloved by Wayne Dyer. So he had people like David Icke that really had a lot of respect for him. So it was just interesting to watch him, go and teach. So, but to summarize who I am, I would say I'm just some regular guy, some guy who became Stuart Wilde's publicist. I also interview spiritual teachers as well, and I don't know, just some regular guy. I consume all the pizza in your house. Consumer of pizza, spiritual seeker.
I love it. What do you think it was initially that drew you to Stuart Wilde?
What initially drew me was I was at a point in my life where I was about 3 years away from leaving all forms of organized religion. I was really committed to it. And once I had left, I was kind of still in an anger phase. And while organized religion is all about telling you how what is happening to you is happening to you externally, and that there's another being outside of you that is controlling everything, that you need to appeal to another being, and you worship. Stuart was all about personal responsibility, and it was so radically different from anything I've ever come across. So when I was reading it, listening to his teachings, he wasn't saying, "Oh my, I'm the person that has the answers." Because when I finally met him in person, I was trying to get some assessments as to why things were the way they are in my life. And he's like, "It's all you. It's like you are personally responsible. What you're seeing in the outside world is a direct reflection of who you are inside." And then I found that absolutely fascinating. So I think that because he was he had a very dramatic teaching style. And because he had a sense of humor, I never came across a teacher that had an outrageous sense of humor the way he did. Everyone else took themselves so seriously, and he didn't. And I resonated deeply with that. So I would say that's what really drew me to him.
Yeah, I was reading as I was preparing for this. First off, I want to say thank you for introducing me to Stuart Wilde. I didn't even know about him until you brought him to my attention. And now it's like I can't stop listening and reading his stuff. It's so true. I was looking through the book Intuition, and everything in there just started speaking to me. The way in which we react with our senses, the way we see the world, the way we can increase our own sensitivity to all of our senses and understand the world around us better. It's really eye-opening, some of these almost technologies that he has shown us. It's pretty fascinating to me.
Yeah, he did some other things too that I thought were very unusual because I'd never come across. He was talking about being able to access different dimensions. I was like, what do? You get on a spaceship or something? No. Yeah. He said, what you do is that all these other dimensions, the parallel realities, are all alongside of us. And he would really be a big proponent of listening to something called a theta metronome, where it's a certain amount of beats. Your brain frequencies are in delta, gamma, theta, beta, alpha. And I think a theta is one brain frequency above delta, which is delta is pretty much where you're sleeping. And he said, if you can maintain your visibility, if you could be awake during these periods of time, your brain oscillates at a slower speed. And then in a meditative state, you'd be able to see these different dimensions. I've never been able to do that, but he was adamant about that. And he taught a lot of other people to see these things. And he wrote in his books in a very clear and scientific manner how you were able to access these. So I thought that was very unusual. And his last book that he wrote, second to last book, Grace, Gaia, and the End of Days, he would talk about his experiences in going to some of these darker worlds and things that he would see. I mean, he was one of the few people that I ever knew that actively enjoyed going to hell. When people would say, go to hell, like, Stuart, go to hell. He's like, yeah, all right, let's go. So he'd go there and he'd write about these things. So I found that really fascinating. And he also was a very big advocate of ayahuasca, which is I think it's the mother, sometimes they call it the vine of death. And the first night I met him, one of the first times he introduced me to that, and that was a life-changing experience. And that was, he really taught people, the benefits of that.
It's fascinating to think that long ago, like you're seeing a resurgence of these plant medicines, ayahuasca and mushrooms, and these different potential doors that help you access not only your inner self, but other dimensions as well. And he was so far ahead of the curve. And when you listen to what he says today, it resonates, even though he said it so long ago, it resonates today with what's happening in our world.
Yeah. He was towards the end before he died, which I can't believe it's going to be 10 years. He was really talking about the return of all the tyrants, but he was also talking about how they were going to fall. I mean, he would make these predictions about it, but he was really, he's a big passionate proponent of working on yourself, shadow processing, which I'd never heard of. And the shadow processing is kind of being emulated by another individual named Jeff Berwick, who's with the Dollar Vigilante. And this person, I listened to him, and there's some certain teachings that this gentleman, Jeff Berwick, has and Stuart have. And I think it's kind of interesting that some of the people that are out there, that people I consider to be very cutting edge, they're saying similar things. So I believe that some of the things that Stuart talked about were on a certain frequency. So people that were similar to Stuart are, I think, within his range, were all talking about things that are very crucial. And the shadow processing was an absolute game changer as far as evolution for me, at least. And I know a lot of people are working on themselves now more than they've ever had.
Yeah, I think I would have to agree. I think that's the answer to getting us into a better spot or making the world better, is that everybody needs to become the best version of themselves. And in doing so, the world kind of takes itself to that next level right there. As his publicist, what was your relationship with him like?
It was pretty interesting. He was like very humble, and we'd get media for him. So it was great that the media was interested, but he was very humble. He didn't want to tout his virtues. I was like, well, that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, you're a publicist. And the whole idea, the way I became his publicist is kind of interesting, I think, because about 3 years prior, I was listening to him, and I was really kind of like, I found him really fascinating. One time I stayed up till 5 a.m. to try to speak with him on Coast to Coast, and I wasn't able to. And then I found out that he was going to Las Vegas, and he was doing this event. So all I wanted to do was meet him. And as soon as I met him, something clicked, and I wanted talking with him afterwards, and then I became his publicist. So it was pretty surreal to know that here's a guy who I really respected, became his publicist, and then he became a really good friend. And it was awesome, because in one way about it, we would talk and collaborate on certain things, and share about what some of the ways he wanted to put things out. But he was the reaction I always got from hosts is that he was always fascinating, because there's so many different ways he could go.
Yeah, it's almost scary when you meet an original thinker, because they're showing you things that you've never heard of before, even though they're all around you. Was that the kind of sense you got when you became friends with him?
Yes. I got the sense from him that he was very cutting edge, and he made the right people feel uncomfortable. So if you were fake, if you were phony, if you were just somebody who had bad intentions, you got very uncomfortable around Stuart. And I love that. I love the fact that he wasn't afraid to make other people upset. He wasn't seeking admirers. I mean, it was nice. I think he liked when people appreciated his teachings, but he also didn't have any problem with speaking his mind, speaking what he believed was the truth. I mean, I never saw a person say the F word several times when he was speaking. He was addressing this entire audience in Vegas, and he was saying "F this" and F that, and he was using but it was great. I thought it was really funny. Some people are like, "Oh, he's cursing, and I don't want to be a part of this." I'm like, that's exactly the kind of people you don't want to hang out with. So it was kind of good. He was kind of weeding him out. But those that were sticking around, it was really cool. So he definitely attracted a good amount of people, and the people that were really close to Stuart, I'd say his inner circle. I'm still in contact with a lot of those people today. And they've all gone on to become very successful. I think Stuart had a profound impact on individuals where he was a teacher's teacher. So I'll give you two examples. Jeff Casper, Yona Brindis, they do this thing called they're energy healers. And I know they work with Stuart, and they're incredibly successful. Richard Tyler worked with Stuart. He's a very successful musician. So a lot of people that worked within his inner circle all went on to do certain things. So it was just interesting to be around a person who, wasn't afraid to speak his mind, to be original. And when it came down to a spiritual teaching, I said one of some of the biggest lessons, he always talked about, tenderness, love, generosity, but he also was passionate about, being original, being true to yourself.
Did he talk about how he came to the insights that he came to? Like some of the stuff that I have seen, only being introduced to him recently, is, I see the books, I see the lectures, but I haven't begun to understand how he began to see the world in which the way he does. Do you know about that story or how that came to be?
I can't say with 100% certainty how he gained all these insights,
right?
But when I'd say that through conversations with him, through things that I've read with him, is that he has been one of those people who would always be in a meditative state. He was never afraid not to explore consciousness. So I'd say probably through ayahuasca, probably through transcendental meditations, where he would use the theta metronome. He would talk a lot about astral projection. He would talk a lot about traversing into these other dimensions. And he believed in something, or I think other people saw it. It was called the Luna world, the Luna. And what it was this parallel reality similar to Earth. And I think it's what a person, what they were on their inside, or who they were truly are, was a representation. So if a person was like a kind person, they'd be presented as a little bit more majestic and kind in this reality. But if they were presenting in our world as like kind, but they're full of crap, the real version of them would be in this world. And he would talk about the Luna as a place where what happened in there would be something that would manifest eventually here. So I think he got some of his insights as far as his predictions go. He was talking about the coming global financial collapse back in I think he was talking about in 2009. And he would have several visions. So he would have these visions, he would write them down, and some of these things would come true, and it would be profound how they would happen. But I think he was a little nervous about it too. He always thought that Gaia, the Mother Earth, was going to strike back against humanity and take humans out, because he thought that we're being very vicious to the animals and being very vicious to the environment. It's pretty wild, some of the stuff he came up with, though. So his insights, I think, came from a number of different ways. He was incredibly intuitive as well. He could read people very quickly.
Yeah. Do you think in a lot of his lectures, he tells people about, like, this is how I developed this sense? I believe from what I was listening to, he was talking a lot about the right brain versus the left brain, and the analytical scalpel of the left brain, and how back in, I think he was speaking about Julian Jaynes' ideas, or maybe they were his ideas, that spoke about the bicameral mind and how we've changed and evolved through then. And I see a lot of that now. Like you can see, like, mental images are just as important as linguistics. But in the West, we don't ever treat mental imagery. We don't treat the creative aspect of ourselves the same way we do our linguistic ability. It's almost like we give those a higher order of thinking. It's strange like that, right?
Yeah, it is very strange. And having had the pleasure of working with people like Dr. James Hart, interviewing him, talks about the power of the brainwave frequencies and how left and right brains, side of your brains are very different. But I mean, Stuart was always a big proponent of creative energy.
Yeah.
So some of these things that he came up with, I would say some of his mannerisms were also a direct reflection of tapping into that intuition. And I would say when it comes to analytical mind, I think he used the analytical mind as a way of describing a scientific methodology of what he was experiencing on his right brain. So if he had an intuitive feeling or a vision, or this is something why it would happen, he wanted to be sure to explain in a scientific manner why it would be it is. So some of his recent books, I think I'm pretty sure it was God's Gladiators. He was explaining how to traverse a certain dimension or the frequency of light, or why you're able to see certain things. And so so he'd have the vision of it, he'd have the intuitive vision, and then he would be able to utilize the left part of his brain to back it up. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's super wild. I'm big into psychedelics, and I love the ideas of people becoming better versions of themselves and healing themselves, whether it's PTSD or optimization through ayahuasca or mushrooms. But it seems like what a lot of people have problems doing, what Stuart did amazingly, was be able to translate that vision that you see in that state into reality. A lot of people, myself included, and I'm curious to get your thoughts, it's very mind-blowing to see the things you see when you're in that heightened state of awareness. Very difficult to bring them back and try to explain them, and that seems to me to be something that Stuart could do.
He was able to do it, and he was also able to put it in a way that it was a language that people could understand.
Yes, yeah, you're right.
Yes, I have a couple friends who've had near-death experiences, and what they experience is indescribable. But they were able to kind of pull into some of the main ideas as to what was going on. And, I always asked Stuart, I was always insatiably curious as to, what was going on? Why were we here? What's the purpose of things? And he had a way of explaining things, but he also was open to really saying that, everyone's on their own journey. And he never had that guru mentality.
Yeah.
There was a person who I met, I can't give you their name because I have to protect this, but this person is well known, very famous. They're considered a big guru. And I spent about 2 hours with this person, and I wasn't impressed at all. I was not impressed. I feel like I walked away from that experience. It's like I didn't learn anything from this person. But then when I was talking to Stuart, it was completely different, because again, he wasn't like saying, look at me, I'm above everyone else. He was just like, I'm exploring things. I found certain ways, I found certain doorways that you can explore. Here's a trail of breadcrumbs behind. So he would like explore and do these things, but he would also want other people to have the tools to see them for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's the optimum lesson in self-discovery, is that it's self-discovery. You got to find it, and people can lead you to the breadcrumbs in there. But was there a particular book or a particular teaching that you found really reached out and grabbed you?
His very first book is called Affirmations. I should have brought it with me. Hold it here because he autographed it. And nice. I read this book. I was in a library one time. I was bookstore, and this is a book that really changed my life. And the reason why I got it is because I opened up the book, and he had this look like this in the back, like, please buy me or something. And I was like, this guy, it's something about this guy. He seems like he's a character. And I bought the book just on that intuition. And when I was reading that book completely changed my life, because his whole premise in there, I think one of his quotes was, life, seriousness is a disease of the ego. And I love that. That was groundbreaking for me. I was like, what? And everything in there was about personal responsibility, that you have to take personal responsibility for your own actions, that all things that are happening to you are a direct result of your beliefs. And I never heard of anything like that before, because everything else I was looking for out there was all about, okay, here's a pattern, here's a belief system, and all that stuff there was eventually about leading you on someone else's path, leading you on someone else's journey, transferring your power to someone else. And his thing was not about that at all. So it was so fundamentally different. I thought it was very radical at the time. So when I discovered that book, it was just, it was a big part of that shadow processing. It was a big part of, I learned I got so much introspection from it. And then his follow-up books, I believe that we're amplifying that same message. And you talked a lot about, this other really interesting book called The Money Bible. And he had a couple principles in there that I still use in business to this day. He said, you have to, if people are going to transfer their wealth to you, they have to feel comfortable. They have to feel comfortable transferring a part of their security. So make sure that you provide a tremendous amount of service, give them a lot of energy, give them love, so I've never heard anyone describe it this way, but I've used that principle in business, and it's been wonderful. So his insights and his way of describing things, I thought were pretty interesting. And I want to bring one other part about his method when he was talking about money. he said this really interesting quote, and I know it made a lot of people upset. He said, "Whoever said that money was the root of all evil, flat out didn't have any." And that made a lot of people upset. Yeah,
It's true. I think that my father-in-law has a great quote on money. He says, "It doesn't make you better, but it sure makes life easier."
yeah,
Right. And for people who have been on both spectrums, if you've had money, and it was Zsa Zsa Gabor who said, "I've been rich and I've been poor. And let me tell you, rich is better."
Well, I think it's good. And he said that it is part of the earth plan. It's part of the experience of coming here. He said that's what you have to do. But the way that he was talking about it, he said he talked about the metaphysics of the poverty consciousness and the metaphysics of abundance. So and again, if you never read any books about personal finance, at least he laid out to you in an energetic way as to why you're going to be attracting more wealth and more opportunities. So again, that personal responsibility aspect I felt was so groundbreaking because it took away any power from any other guru. I think all these people that are out there, they're all trying to get your attention. They're all trying to own a piece of you. They're trying to own. They will want you to have allegiance to them. And when a person puts information that says, here's some gifts that you can have, and I don't care if you have allegiance to me, I think it's incredibly original and very empowering. And I think that's a big reason why Stuart had such a really tremendous following. He had a lot of people that really respected him because he walked with people. He didn't walk on top of them. He walked alongside of them.
Yeah. And I think correct me if I'm wrong, is that something that he tried to teach people to do? Because it seems that in the world we live in today, it's almost the antithesis of that. It's almost hey, let's try to get people to give you your stuff, and then you control them. They give you your power, you walk on top of them, and
of course, the world's going into. I think the world's going into a hard tyranny. It's like they're trying to push us into some kind of global tyranny. Stuart talked about that. He talked about that too. But he walked alongside people. He walked with. I mean, he did this event in Las Vegas, and he did a bunch of things. We were speaking a bunch of times, and I saw him there twice. And both times, instead of going into his room and hiding away, he would hang out at the bar and hang out with people and have a beer and then drink among people. It was pretty cool. I never saw that before. And all these other things I went to, I went to see someone speak. They were always kind of hidden away, but it was accessible. So I found that to be very unusual, and that's another reason why I really respected him.
Yeah, it's interesting to me as I went back and started listening to some of his talks. It's almost it really resonated to me, the part you wrote about him being a teacher's teacher, because he was saying all these things before any of these newer people came out and were talking. I listened to his Left Brain, Right Brain, and it reminds me of Julian Jaynes. There was a lot of empowerment on there that it seems like Tony Robbins had picked up some things from. And it seems to me like he was one of the original. Was there a lot of theosophy in there? Like I was picking up a little bit of theosophy in there.
Theosophy, you mean in terms of his his philosophy, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. He did a couple insights. He wanted to elaborate on things, and everything he came down to was really ultimately about empowering the individual, but also some of them were about, I think, some hard lessons as well. He was really quick to point out all the ways that the system was trying to manipulate you. So he would be really quick to explain as to why you have so much power you don't even realize it. He goes, you have the power to change things, you have the power to do all these different things. And one of the worst things that these control freaks are doing is they are making you believe that you don't have the power. They're giving you the illusion that you don't have this power. And it's like, no, you have so much power. And he also would say things like, life was never meant to be a struggle. It's like this whole idea that life's some trial and tribulation. He's like, no. He's like, it's meant to be a walk in the park and a breeze. And he would also say things like, don't anticipate, God coming down to fix everything. He's like, God's out playing golf. It's like, you're going to fix everything. It's like, it's up to you. So he would have these little mannerisms, but everything we would do ultimately was about, I think, empowering other people. Because when he came to be, I think he had an insight into this world naturally that other people didn't have. And I think he had a lot of empathy for people because he realized how trapped they were. And he wanted to really help them out. And he was part of a group that I identified with. I didn't realize who I was, and I'm sure you're probably one of these Georges, that he called them fringe dwellers. And he said these are people that are, when they grew up, they knew they were naturally unusual, and they're in the system. They're operating outside the system. They've never been in the system, and that's exactly what I am as a fringe dweller. And he said he is like the champion of the fringe dweller. So he always wanted to find people and help people out that knew they weren't part of this thing, but kind of help them navigate and survive, and also wake other people up.
I love that description, because I was actually talking to one of the guys that are commenting on here, Simon Vanderels, and we were talking about some people live on the edge of the forest, and they can go into the forest and then come back into the village, go into the forest and come back into the village. And it seems to me like that's so much of the fringe. That's so much like Stuart, the king of the fringe dwellers. You go out there and you get this information that's revealed to you, and you can bring it back and help people. And maybe do you think that that's what his legacy is to continue to give information to the rest of us fringe dwellers, so we can carry on this idea of helping people through seeing the world differently?
I think that's part of it, but I also think one of the big part of his legacy is that you should explore. And he was very adamant about exploring and the personal responsibility. And he said, basically, you can be successful. You can be incredibly successful and treat other people well. You can have an abundance of consciousness and, be healthy and treat people really good. And you can also be a teacher while not being a guru. So this idea that he would, just, teach, explore, and teach radical concepts and not be looked at as somebody who is, a Buddha, it's just completely different. So I think he was like the anti guru. I would say that would be one of his legacies. But another part of his legacy would be his innovative teachings about, experiencing other dimensions, and really talking about ayahuasca, the benefits of ayahuasca, healing your shadow is another part of it. Being a passionate advocate of love, tenderness, and generosity, not just in the sense of, okay, we should do this, but he's like, but the sacredness of it. And he also talked about your word as law. And he would also talk about certain things, the power of your words, that if you speak certain things, you're always going to attract things to it. I mean, I know he's talking about the law of attraction in some ways, but he always tried to take it a step further. And the fact that he was able to, I guess, see certain things, he wanted other people to see the same things he was seeing.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing, but a dangerous thing too, right? I mean, I guess that's maybe why he had some animosity towards gurus. If the guru is getting someone to see something, it's not like he's allowing the individual to see it for themselves. He's showing them a vision, which is kind of an authoritarian thing to do. Is that what do you think? What do you think it was between him and the gurus that really wasn't meshing?
Well, I think because the gurus were all based in ego. I think the gurus wanted admiration. There's a person who I'll mention his name because Deepak Chopra also started with Stuart. Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer were kind of like, Stuart would be like the main person speaking at these engagements. Since Deepak and Wayne Dyer were on there as well. And I think there were certain aspects of Deepak where other people, they were all ego. They were all about themselves. So whereas he was trying to present a vision and trying to present teachings for the people, I think others were all about trying to glorify themselves and deity themselves. And I don't think he didn't respect other people that were focusing their teachings about them. He said he didn't want to develop a cult of personality. He was really against that. And because of him, because of the way he spoke, I think he actually prevented a lot of people from falling into cults. I think some of his people that really like listened to him, I'm sure they're probably protected or insulated from joining any kind of cults, because when you're able to empower other people and show them the beauty of their power and also teach them, how to protect themselves, you're not going to be susceptible for other people. So I think he was really against the gurus because he did not appreciate the fact that they made it about them and not about the followers or the students.
It's interesting to think about how spirituality sometimes has the negative aspect of that, right? Like some people who are really big and they're great spiritual speakers, they tend to build up this cult of personality around them.
It's probably hard to resist too. I mean,
I can imagine.
If you go out and if you're speaking and all of a sudden all these people admire you, And it's a nice thing. I mean, it probably feels really good when you have people that admire you and love you and praise you up and down. But I'm sure that with a little bit, it probably gets out of the point where you start believing your own press, and I guess sometimes it's human nature. I mean, you can't believe that everyone's going to do the right thing all the time. And I'm not going to say that Stuart was 100% right all the time. There were certain things that we definitely disagreed on, and I respectfully disagree with him on. So one of them was about cannabis. He would say that if you smoke cannabis, you're going to tear holes in your etheric field, and you're going to let the entities come in. And I respectfully disagree with him, but I also saw where he was coming with it, because I think sometimes if you do cannabis and you get super paranoid and you start freaking out and you start having negative experiences, I can understand why he would come to that conclusion. But for other people, cannabis is one of those things where it takes somebody from a high stress state to a relaxed state, and they're more pleasant. So we would have our disagreements with it. But getting back to Stuart, he wasn't. Not, I don't think anyone's perfect, but his intentions were always in the right place, I believe.
Yeah, that's a great measure of a person, is someone who is always trying to do the best or do what's right. Even though it may not manifest in that way, you can get a good vibe. But he spoke a lot about being able to see people's intentions or see their energies too, right?
Yeah, he did. I mean, when I first met him, he was looking at me, and I think he was looking over my head, and I was like, "What is this guy? What is he looking at?" And I'm like, "Oh, he's probably checking to see if I'm evil or not." So I thankfully I passed that test. But I think he had a heightened sensitivity. He also had people that were around him that were very sensitive as well, that could see energy fields. I have a couple of friends that can see energy fields and see, I don't know if it's auras, but they can actually can intuitively feel or sense the energy frequency of a person, knowing that it does change. So, I mean, he wasn't. It's not a perfect system, but he was able to to sense and feel people out pretty good.
Nice. I got a comment here that maybe you can address. I think it's something that this one comes to us. What's up, Simon? Thanks for chiming in. Simon says, Stuart sounds similar to Krishnamurti, although I think he had to really push people away not to be his followers. I'm not familiar with Stuart's work and thought, is there a relationship or similarity?
To push people away not to be his followers?
Well, he was talking about the relationship between Stuart and Krishnamurti, who was the potential next Dalai Lama, but chose not to be.
Okay. I don't think Stuart was pushing people away. He was kind of like he was a person that was, I guess, he liked to host the party. He liked to have people around him and just kind of explore together. So when it comes to followers, I mean, it's kind of strange to this day. Knowing him, especially when we talked to him, I don't think he ever really wanted followers. He wanted people that would explore with him. So he would have friends that would, so he would do things, and he would want to talk to people that were also on the same path and learn from them as well. He was always walking with people. He didn't seek to be a person that would be a leader or ruler over someone. And so he never got to that point. And again, that's incredibly unusual, because he could have easily done that. He could have easily built a cult around himself. Right. He would have had a lot of people. And I've seen other people throughout the years do that. I've seen them, build this, and if they have some kind of charisma, it's incredible how it happens. But he never got to that point. He never got to the point ever. I don't think he was even attempted by it.
Yeah, it has to be an incredible set of standards and values and will. Maybe you can look at Ram Dass and see something similar, where there's all these people trying to clamor towards you, and it's just kind of, at some point in time, not only should it feel good, but it would be scary to think that all these people are willing to do whatever you tell them to do. In a weird way, having that much power is something that you should be afraid of, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want a following or anything like that. No, that's just me. I just want to be left alone. Frankly.
Right.
I don't need followers. Well, maybe to take out the garbage and do some house cleaning. I'd say that I'd keep maybe 2 followers on hand for that. But and I think what we're seeing today is a lot of I feel the world is completely immersed in ego. It's so egocentric. And there's a gentleman named Doug Casey who I have the pleasure of interviewing. Very fascinating. He talks about the moral collapse of the West and how people just really don't care, that there's no difference between right and wrong. And when you have that kind of collapse, and you have the people that are really, the society is really kind of going off the charts. And then a good friend of mine, Nancy Dennison, who had this ridiculous near-death experience, she said that humans are basically animals. She said humans are animals just like the other animals outside that you see, like, cats and dogs. There's just a different breed of animal. And, you have light beings within the animal. And if the animal the light being within the air succeeds all of its power to the ego and the animal, it's going to act, irresponsibly. But if it's in touch with its spirit, if it's one with the light being within, then it's going to really start acting morally. It's going to act generously. It's going to act in alignment closer to what that light being truly is, and not at the whims of the ego of the animal that it's manifesting.
Yeah. So when I was reading through Intuitions, Stuart had talked about how we have just begun to overdevelop the left side of the brain. And it sounds to me like that's a lot of what this ego is. And if you look at our society, you can just see it everywhere. Like, it's just this overdeveloped sense of self-importance that is poisoning everything around us.
Yeah, I think so. It's pretty well. Yeah, because people seem like they can be easily controlled, and they are easily controlled. And it was shocking in the past few years seeing how easily people are able to be controlled. There's certain beliefs that people have. I completely don't adhere to them. I was already outside of society, the normal beliefs that they have. So I was always outside, and just to see how a lot of people would just drop a hat and just follow something without questioning it. I found it really shocking. So as far as the left brain goes, there's a gentleman named Jason Christoff who I highly recommend checking out, listening to. He really nails this when he says the best way to control a person is to control their environment. If you can change the environment, you can manipulate and control the person. So it's pretty wild.
No, it's super wild. I know that fear seems to be a huge motivation for people. And it seems to me with invisible enemies all around us, like there's this idea of fear that's controlling people. What was Stuart's take on fear? Did he ever talk about that with you?
Well, he said a lot of the fear was generated from, the people that want to control you. He said, if they can control you, they can disempower you. He's like, if you put someone in a state of fear, they are in a state where they're not critically thinking. And then he also talked about the fear being generated by, I think, transdimensionals or beings that, won't necessarily be friendly, and they're kind of getting a snack off of you. And when I think about that teaching us, I think about maybe some stuff that David Icke has said, and some of the other people that, apparently if we have all these beings that are around us that we can't see, I'm sure they're probably getting some nutrients off the fear. But fear, this is according to, at least what I can see firsthand, and some of the other people I've talked with, that I think fear has an expiration date. You can only get so much blood out of the stone. And if you just, put people in a state of fear all the time, eventually it's not going to work anymore. It's going to go flat. So I wonder if people are going to be feared out, if they're going to be done with the fear, and their tactics are just not going to work. And when the tactics no longer work and they can't make people be in a state of fear, I think that's when they lose their control. So I think fear and control are kind of one and the same. So they have to keep you in a state of fear.
That's well put, Ryan. I think that's where we're at. Like, if you just look at every new act that comes out, it's just trying to be bigger and bigger, but it's actually getting sillier and sillier.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. There was another person, Matthias Essman, wrote a book about the psychology of totalitarianism. Talked about mass formation,
right?
In that, and he was talking about the psychology behind totalitarianism, how certain percentage of the population, they will do whatever they are told without questioning, and you have a greater percentage of that population that will do whatever there is to appeal that smaller percentage of the population. So if 10 to 50% of the population are all like, the majority are going to do whatever they want to pacify that small minority. And then you have the smallest of the minority within that mass formation are the people that are like, no, I don't believe this at all, and I'm not going to do it. And those are the people, the fringe dwellers, the critical thinkers, those are the people that are not going to fall or succumb to this.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
We need more. I think we need more of those people. If you're one of those people, I highly recommend having 6, 7 kids, because we need replacements.
It's true. It's true. We need more people. Excuse me. Well, I think that we could start by getting to reintroduce people like Stuart, to reintroduce some great thinkers out there so that people can build their own foundation so that they can begin to think critically about situations that happen in their life. And, it must have been a real gift to get to be part of that circle to get to learn the lessons from the source. And I know we're kind of coming up on time a little bit here, but maybe you could leave us a little bit with maybe 3 of the things that you still carry with you from Stuart to this day and you use in your life.
Well, one of the first things I do, I always think in mind, is when Stuart passed, I made a commitment to him. I don't know if I ever told him this to him, but I said, I was going to be your publicist in this lifetime and the next lifetime. Mm-hmm. I will always be your publicist. So I never pass up an opportunity to talk about him. I want people to keep his legacy alive. I want future generations to rediscover him. But there were a couple of things that I will always want to keep in mind with him or try to honor Stuart is to always explore and to go and to look for truth in places where it is absolutely hard and terrifying. So it's hard sometimes to seek the truth out, knowing what I'm going to find or knowing where the truth might actually bring me. So I would say just be absolutely fearless when it comes to pursuing the truth. 2, express love, tenderness, and generosity at every opportunity. Like, don't pass up an opportunity to offer someone a kind word or to be a positive reflection in someone's life. Just be a good person. I love that. And 3, don't take yourself so seriously. That's another thing I always took away from Stuart, because I think when I was discovering him, I was taking life a little more seriously. I mean, I was always joking around, but I took life very seriously. And when I met with him, he kind of shouted that. He's like, no. He's like, no, this is you taking this seriously? He's like, you're gonna be out of here so fast. Like, laugh. He's like, laugh. He's like, make death your friend. Mm-hmm. Laugh about this whole thing. He said, if you don't, he basically he took away the fear of life and what could happen and enjoying it. So the fact that he was being very comedic about this, and also I would say that the confidence and that comedic aspect made a lot of people uncomfortable, because when people make you have a fear over death and make you have a fear that if you don't follow their way, that you're going to be in a bad place, it takes away, and you don't acknowledge that, it takes away almost all the power. So I'd say that, again, 3, live your life and have a lot of fun and laugh.
I love it. I love it. This is I just want to say thanks on behalf of myself and the audience for reintroducing Stuart's legacy to me. And I've already got a couple comments where people are like, hey, this is great. I'm going to have to read some of this stuff. And I appreciate it. And I think you're doing a good job at being a publicist. But and thank you for those 3 key points. I think those are great points. But before I go, I know this was about Stuart, but where can people find you, Ryan? Maybe we can just introduce you a little bit. Where can people find you? What do you got coming up? And what are you excited about?
Well, I produce a show called The Outer Limits of Inner Truth. And it's outerlimitsradio.com. And that's one, I started that about 4 years after Stuart had died. And it was, because I would always ask Stuart questions, and I always wanted to keep something going where I would interview people. But they can learn more about me there. And I just want to tell you that you are a fantastic host. You really have a keen way of asking you're down to earth, you're very gentle to earth. Thank you. You're an excellent host. And afterwards, after this interview, I'll let you know if we can speak, because I like to do whatever I can to help you out, because you're fantastic at what you do.
You're just saying that because it's true.
I'm saying it. And you got that sense of humor too. Yeah, absolutely.
It takes one to know one, man. Absolutely. Thank you. I really appreciate it. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. I hope you go and check out Stuart's work, Stuart Wilde. He's got tons of books out there, and I promise you, if you just begin reading them, it'll be very difficult to stop reading them. Go to check out Ryan's site, Outer Limits. Check out the radio show, and come and hang out with us on True Life Podcast. That's all we got for today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for everything. I hope your day is beautiful, and we will see you tomorrow. Aloha.